Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another week of Esports Wrap. I'm your host, Michael Amagon. And it is good. I know it's the second episode for the year, but it is good saying those. Um, Today we're going to be actually talking about two topics that are kind of hitting across the board in some different circles, I guess you could say. The first being gaming simulators as games, and this can be from how should I put it? The first ones that really came about were the Sims, and that took the world by storm. There's still a lot of people still playing the Sims nowadays. But it all depends. Like there hasn't been a Sims 5 in feels like over a decade now, and they've just been releasing DLCs, I guess you could say, expansions that just builds upon the world. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense. That's allowing them to just continue developing a world that they already have. People get to keep the characters that they have, and they just keep adding more stuff, which, you know, in the long run, especially when it comes to online, that's not a bad thing. Now, we then move on to another step, which is when things like Tycoon Simulator started. That's pretty much when businesses started to try and take this avenue of it, and from there then you also started to notice a lot of flash games coming around the time of the internet. You know, this is around like Newgrounds times, a lot of flash games coming out, so on and so forth. But when you actually start to take a look at that, it kind of leads you towards how other games started as well. So Tycoon, for those who are unaware, was a game that was created where you build your own, and it started off as an amusement park. You build your own amusement park, and then you start to just gather in more people, make more attractions, become like this tycoon, just raking in the money. Now, that's cool and all. But then they started moving into other things, other forms of entertainment, other avenues of business. And so a lot of people started to take it as a form of education, I guess you could say. You know, you do this, then this is what typically happens, so on and so forth. And so they started to get a little bit more business savvy. And that's the thing that I kind of want to touch on today. Just a little bit. Because when you take a look at games that have developed since then and become more of a real life simulator, you have to start taking a look at sports games. So let's take a look at something like Madden. Madden nowadays has some very, very in-depth plays, and unfortunately for Madden, I can't really say negatively towards them on this, but when you really start taking a look at games as football, there's NFL 2K, and NFL 2K and Madden have been kind of fighting it out for years. But at the end of the day, there's always this one game that's just a little bit better, and you start to notice these things across the board. So there was Madden NFL 2K, it was NBA 2K versus NBA Live, and then now it's also in some circles FIFA versus eFootball PES. And there's always these slight qualities here or there that always has people up in arms. So, for an example, I reached out to the international community that deals with esports, well, one of them, and just asked the question, like, so why am I seeing so many countries or gaming, like some of the higher up gaming places, like events, I should say, using games like PES versus something like FIFA? And the conversation that actually came from that was quite interesting. Um, it came down from everything from marketing dollars to just trying to find it inside. The licensing says the main reason is FIFA not giving the license for FIFA tournaments. Uh, One person is saying like doing a FIFA tournament, you contacted FIFA or Regional Football Federation license. Everyone can do a FIFA tournament without asking for the license, but if your tournament is big enough, you'd ask for a license, and usually they say EA or FIFA won't grant it, while Konami, who owns PES, just lets you do the tournament and sometimes will even help you. And stuff like that is a little concerning when it comes to sporting games, because that's typically where you see the simulation stuff happening nowadays. And by God, I am not talking about the farming simulator. I have someone who consistently comes after me talking about, hey, when are we going to do the farming simulator? When are we going to make that a thing? I am not looking to make that a thing. I mean, if there's a community for it, by all means, go for it. But that's a niche community of all things, a farming simulator. So getting back to the actual point of sports, you have to take a look a little bit further than it, and there are some pros and cons to some of these games. For example, some of the calls in I'm gonna be going with soccer for a bit with this, but this is kind of true across the board. And I'm mainly going with soccer because this is the one that I actually asked about. Now, when it comes to that, they noticed that FIFA sometimes makes some bad plays in terms of the AI, where the AI sometimes doesn't try to block a ball from entering the goal, or the ref makes a bad call and acts like he doesn't see it, which, to be quite honest, that sounds a lot more like real life to me. But when it comes to PES, you can actually be a bit more creative. You can dribble a lot better. I mean, characters, you can actually set up proper plays than you can with FIFA. And maybe it's that element of it is the reason why certain countries are actually taking a look at it. Just to name a few, when we spoke to Colombia about some other games, we found out that, you know, PES, the International Esports Federation, that sounds like they're going to be going with PES. Now, WESCO, which is the World Esports Consortium, they seem to be going for their upcoming games with FIFA. And if I could find if actual chair, the president of, not the president of WESCO. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff based off of it, and it really depends on the market. So here in the Bahamas, I can pretty much go to anyone, and I'm almost positive they won't know what the heck PES is. They know FIFA, and they probably know FIFA because of regular soccer. And that was actually a pretty smart move in terms of EA's part, because they actually went with the brand names, meaning that they have more of the actual players, the teams, so on and so forth. So they have a bit more recognition and clout in that regard, because you're actually getting the official persons. Versus PES, which doesn't have that same kind of leeway, and you're playing these made-up teams, or you might get a few actual persons, but it's not going to be the same amount of persons. Unfortunately, though, becomes and boils down to a matter of main things. One, do you want the ease of having your tournament? Or two, do you want your quality in terms of actual gameplay to be more or less how it should be, or something that's not quite there but close? And I feel like there should always be a rivalry with that, but it's not really that much of a rivalry anymore because of that same situation. I can go to anyone, say, you know, Pez, they look at me and think I'm talking about the old candies from back in the day, and like a Pez dispenser, and they won't really know about it. And so the marketing for it sucks. The viewership for it kind of sucks. The amount of persons that might be interested in playing it probably also sucks as well. So it's not really the best. But I mean, as time goes on, I fully expect these things to start taking a new form of life. And that I think is what the international committee is hoping for, where these simulators start taking things to a further level in terms of you're actually playing the games yourself. And what I mean by that is VR, or something that actually came out as of, it was a little bit earlier today. Find it. But yeah, there's this, sorry, it came out yesterday. Essentially is that a FIFA team can be trained by putting a chip in your shoe. And essentially, they said this is a new collaboration between Adidas, EA, and Google, because it's kind of touching on, you know, that old Pokestop. Well, but it uses the same kind of stuff that Pokemon Go, Ingress, Harry Potter, so on and so forth are using now when it comes to pedometers and the worlds and stuff like that. So the tech works essentially by inserting a chip into the insole of a pair of football or soccer boots / cleats, and that will track the user's activity while playing the actual sport. So you buy that, not a whole custom pair of boots, you just buy the insoles, buy the chip, put it inside your shoe. The data that that chip then receives from you will be integrated with FIFA Ultimate Team Mobile, a mobile game. Gotcha there. And use to train and improve your virtual players. Essentially, you know, like a Tamagotchi or the old Pokemon games where you have a certain amount of steps and it levels up your Pokemon, or you get candies nowadays, you know. Or, much like what they do with the Pokeball Plus, where you know, walk around with it. The more you walk around, the more stuff you get. Which they really cut in half when it came to Pokemon Sword and Shield. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for that. But yeah, so apparently this is going to be coming out as of March 10th, so that is going to be today. And you can see stuff by heading over to Footy Headline. They've had some information about this as well. To be quite honest, it's a bit weird. I am almost positive I'm not going to get it because I don't play soccer like this anymore. And this could be good for persons that are actually in soccer teams, or that play soccer at school, or play soccer recreationally, where, you know, as you play, it levels up your characters, and so you play better versus your friends when you're off and just having fun. But how should I put it? Things aren't always going to work out so well. And when you start to deal with online sports, the question then also kind of becomes, you know, how does things happen when you start to interact in the real world? When you're actually going to esports tournaments and events. And unfortunately, there's a pesky bug that's going around called the coronavirus. and this is something that, you know, a number of persons have been messaging me about and are a little bit concerned. Um, especially since it has such a dubious, I shouldn't say dupe, but that's a shady amount of information about how it originally started. So everything from the person who actually found it and tried to whistleblow on it dying to the virus himself, to persons saying that, you know, the places where this started, which is in Wuhan, China, that essentially people were covering up information and that they were burning bodies and not giving the correct amount of information about how many people died, so on and so forth. People trying to escape to go visit other countries and try to evade detection. So going so far as to take things that lowers your fever, try and avoid the actual like detections that they do at the airports and other places that actually allow you to travel. And then post about it on social media like one lady did, where she was blatantly bragging about how she was able to get through while she had the coronavirus, was on a plane, exposing herself to many other persons, and then went to was Italy. And surprise, surprise, now look at Italy is on lockdown. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. When it comes to Corona, we have to take a look at the timeline, quite honestly. So the first casualty for esports was back in January 25th with League of Legends, and this was in China's LPL and LDL, which was postponed as the outbreak worsens. They said that they were set to resume February 3rd after a break of the Lunar New Year. Now, funnily enough, February 16th. So, this is shortly after they were supposed to have delayed it. You have people at LPL saying that things came to a standstill. And LPL themselves sent out a tweet saying that we have decided to postpone week 2 of LPL until we can ensure the safety and health of our players and fans. To our fans, we sincerely apologize that it has come down to this, and we will share any and all information as soon as we can. Stay safe, and thank you for all your support. Now, that didn't quite work out well at all, because commentators, some famous English commentators, he said, were concerned about the whole situation and have already, well, at the time, already had packed their bags. Persons like Dagda, Hysterics, Penguin, and Multibles posted a video on Twitter saying, quote, "We don't really know the extent of how dangerous it is, but it seems like it could be a lot worse than people think, so we're getting the out of here." And it's just kind of grown from there. So after that, it was then Overwatch League for January 29th, where they canceled both their February and March homestands in China. And that was to protect the health and safety of fans in light of the coronavirus affecting the country. They then, on February 14th, announced that China homestands will be moved to South Korea. They said that the makeup matches for homestands will be held in Seoul, where some were to be played in a studio in Seoul during weeks 6 and 7, while others were supposed to be added in Seoul Dynasty's homestand of Dongdaeum during week 5, March 7th, 8th. Zero Tool, thank you for following, and welcome to the Cookie Pack. Now, February 19th, though, things kind of continued in a not so great fashion, because Overwatch League and League of Legends both, well, for Overwatch League, Gen G, Dual Dynasty announced plans to donate to the coronavirus charities, which is a good thing. they announced that they would donate all proceeds from the upcoming March homestand in game skins and merchandise sales through the end of March to charities helping those affected by the coronavirus. This was effectively the first real form of esports giving back to the coronavirus research fund to try and knock this out as quickly as possible, because this is actually starting to affect people's livelihoods. Now, China's LPL's plans, they planned this scrimmage broadcast amid corona hiatus, where China's League of Legends Pro League officially remained on hiatus due to the corona outbreak, but competition resumed in the form of a broadcast online scrimmages between LPL teams that began on February 6th. However, February 24th, Overwatch League in South Korea was cut. That also affected not only weeks 5 and 7, but 5, 6, and 7, I should say, because of concerns over it jumping from China to Korea. The 27th, well, this is no surprise, but one of the biggest events of the year, IEM, which stands for Intel Extreme Masters, in Katowice, which is Katowice, Poland, they decided they weren't going to actually allow the audience to attend the event in person. Meaning that because of area politicians' worries about potential coronavirus contaminations, granted there weren't any confirmed instances of coronavirus actually happening, but to ensure that the safety of residents and visitors to the region, they cut that. And so that actually left off a lot of people not so happy, especially those that already bought tickets and hotels and tickets to the event. The only solstice that they actually had is that they could have watched the event from their hotel room or their hotel, which a lot of people actually posted their pictures of doing, where they sat by the pool and watched the game on a laptop. That was not so great. You could tell a lot of people were seething about that, but they kind of understood the reason why. But when you've probably spent a few $1,000s to travel from the United States to Poland, that kind of sucks big time. Now, then came February 28th, just a day after, where one of the biggest gaming conferences in the world, Game Developer Conference, came with some very bad news, along with some other bad news from other companies. So we had the Game Developer Conference, which was canceled amid, stuff happening in North California. Now, this is also during the time where the outbreak of corona slowly started to make its way into the States. This is around the time, I believe, about 6 to 14 persons were actually identified as having the coronavirus. Most of them being, started off in California and then has slowly moved its way across other states, now affecting places like New York. So it's quite literally from coast to coast at this particular juncture. But that's not really surprising, considering that both of them are major airport hubs. When you're coming from the eastern part of the world, you're going to either be coming from either one of those airports. Because if you're coming from far east, you're going to be heading over to California. But if you're heading from western part of the east, any sense, you're going to be hitting, more than likely, New York as your first stop. But yeah, a lot of game publishers actually just started dropping out from GDC, and it came to the point where there were so many that dropped out. GDC just decided to, we're gonna cut this. Then we also had Street Fighter V, which 3 Capcom Pro Tour dates were scrapped due to the virus going across the world, where we had the removal of the Brussels Challenge 2020, the Norco Regions 2020. So we have a question asking, can I inject COVID-19? Is it a buzz? So I want to make sure that this is what you're actually asking is actually like injecting it, or like are you just trying to interject and say that it's not coronavirus, it's more specifically the COVID-19 strain of the coronavirus? Do let me know, because you know I don't mind actually answering that. But if you are talking about actually injecting it, it might be possible, to be quite honest, because it's more of a touch thing. I don't see why it actually couldn't, especially if you just let it, if you did it within a certain period of time, probably could, which kind of scary when you really think about it. But yeah, so it was the Brussels Challenge 2020, Norco Regionals 2020, and April Annihilation 2020. And then League of Legends China's LPL to resume play in an online format. They actually started it, and they were required to complete a mandatory 14-day quarantine period, pass all local health requirements to ensure their physical health, and that they are free of the virus. Players will participate in matches via their club headquarters unless they are quarantined in provinces like Hubei, where the viruses originated and are unable to travel. On-site referees will be used whenever available to ensure the fairness and competitive integrity of the league. Makes sense. It's an online game, you can do stuff like that. And the netcode's not bad, so kudos. But March 2nd comes along, coronavirus cases continue to go up. South Korea decides to postpone the LCK, and for the second half from March 9th onwards because of the spread of the coronavirus in the country. So says Riot. Previously, the LCK had closed its media room until further notice after host Mina Kim was taken to the hospital with a tested negative, but staff and journalists were put under an 11-hour quarantine during the test, and the media room was closed shortly afterward. There's a lot of debate happening as to how long this thing actually lasts on different surfaces. So it makes sense why they want to shut down the entire room to make sure that no one else gets infected. The next game to actually get affected was, though, what I did there. What happened on March 5th with Rocket League, which the game developed by Psyonix, which is now owned by Epic Games. Now, their Rocket League Season 9 World Championships were scheduled for April 24th to 26th in Texas, but it was canceled because of Corona. And, well, Texas is now actually also has Corona, so what do you expect? Then things start to really get heated up on March 6th, which is when Overwatch League announces precautions for Washington Justice homestand, saying that, you know, they'll have some additional health precautions and that it will include comprehensive cleaning of the venue every day, well-stocked hand washing supplies in every restroom, increased access to hand sanitizer around the venue, instructing people to wash their hands, and adjustments from meet and greets to Q&As. So it's less likely that you're going to actually touch someone. After the final match of the day, Apex Legends then also canceled their Global Series Major. Well, I shouldn't say canceled, but it was postponed, where EA announced that they, I guess you could say postponed and canceled it, several of their games, and also the FIFA Global Series events due to spread of the coronavirus. Mortal Kombat, which is a game ran by NetherRealm Studios, cut off its public access day before the Chicago tournament, where that's essentially saying that the live audience at Final Combat, one of their premier Mortal Kombat 11 events in Chicago, and canceled the last chance qualifier, citing concerns about the spread. Pokemon also was affected. Yeah, a lot of stuff got affected this day. I'm not even done yet. The European International Championships were shut down by the recommendations of public health officials, saying that they would postpone it due to the rising concerns, but they were originally set for Berlin for April 17th to 19th. Hearthstone Masters was moved to online-only format, which is actually part of their $250,000 Hearthstone Masters Tour, which was scheduled to be played offline in Los Angeles between March 20th and 22nd. The event was expected to draw about 40 pro players to LA, but had already been relocated from Indonesia over concerns of the coronavirus. Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So we had oh lord. Anyway, be it. This is actually the second. Yes, if you count Overwatch as a shooter, this is the third shooter. But Flashpoint, a new global offensive league, was set to kick off on March 13th, but it announced that it would be holding its debut event entirely in Los Angeles studio and canceled an April playoff event in Stockholm because of the corona outbreak. It doesn't really seem like that's going to really work out so well either, but we'll have to. League of Legends also then had to move their spring finals for the LCS, and that they are carefully monitoring the outbreak. So the Legends European Championship actually had to split a final schedule between, for April 25th to 26th, from Budapest, Hungary to Berlin, citing concerns of the spread, and then the spring finals are still scheduled to take place in the Dallas suburb of Frisco, Texas on April 18th to 19th, the league announced, but it's carefully monitoring the situation, which we probably, considering that other games have also already stopped over in Texas, might not work out so well. Call of Duty took extra precautions for Los Angeles homestand. Mutineers Pressini cites coronavirus as the decision to skip the LA tournament for the Call of Duty League. The city of Austin decided to cancel SXSW. That is interesting because that would have actually featured the EMLS Cup, which is a gaming expo and an award show for this year. Now, for those that are unaware, that's a soccer, so Major League Soccer. But I'm just kind of on with that whole thing, eFootball. But that was an interesting one. And then Twitch actually canceled TwitchCon in Amsterdam, which is a leg of its biannual conference, which was scheduled for May 2nd and 3rd. But on March 6th, they said that, the Associated Press reported that there are more than 100,000 confirmed cases of the coronavirus worldwide, with the majority in China, and in Europe, several countries have confirmed cases, with Italy confirming more than 79 deaths, the most on the continent. Now, since then, the point of note, Italy has now been on lockdown. They've actually gone on complete lockdown. This is the beginnings. I don't know, I shouldn't say that. But Plague, the game, comes to mind. Well, countries are actually starting to go on this full-on lockdown. First China, now Italy. And today, Riot Games announced that the mid-season invitational has been moved all the way to July. Now, for those that are interested in the event that is happening for Rocket League and for Street Fighter with the Intel World Open, which is happening just before the Tokyo Olympics 2020, this is a little concerning as well because, you know, when you really take a look at it, all these different game events are actually starting to close down, move, so on and so forth. And, well, there's Japan right next to China, and essentially it's just a skip over the pond, I guess you could say, if you're speaking from this side of the world. But it's not looking good. But on the same notion, I reached out to Intel and actually asked them about it and was told that, quote, they do not have an official stance on it. Actually, you know what? Let me get the exact quote. Quote, we continue to monitor the coronavirus situation carefully and have nothing to announce at this time. And essentially, that, you know, keep registering for the events. It's still going to be the online qualifiers first, the different regions. Then you're going to have the meetup in Katowice, if that actually does happen. And then you're going to be selecting from there. And those persons who are selected will then head to the International World Open to compete in both Street Fighter and Rocket League, if that happens. And folks, that's I don't like to put a downer on situations, but that is actually a pretty big if, because we don't know what's happening with this. A lot of people are saying that Corona is going to go down during the summertime because that's typically the time when flus and stuff like that, which this has a lot of symptoms of, go down because of the heat. But it's not actually so much the heat. It's just because, you know, other things are affected. It's breezy, it's less drafty. Heat does have a factor in it. Yes, I'm not denying that. But to say that it's going to kill the coronavirus? No. I live in the Bahamas. We have heat. The heat does not stop the flu. Trust me on that. But honestly, this is not something to necessarily be extremely paranoid about. But it is something to continually keep an eye on. Especially if you want to go to international tournaments, championships, things like Evo, Big Tree, the CEO. Those are international championships that happen in the United States that bring in large crowds of persons, and I'm a little worried that this year those might be affected as well, depending on just how long this virus actually sticks around. Or, as people are also mentioning, you know, there's also the fact that this is not necessarily the end of the world. There's a ton of information we don't know about this, but at the point that it currently is, and again, I think a lot of people are thinking about plague here, where viruses mutate and become deadly over time. That's not the point where we're at right now. There's been no mutations of this particular strain. And while it's not a guarantee that it won't, it's also not killing more persons than, say, the flu. At least last I checked. So the media is really blowing it out because it's something new. It's something that we're unaware of, that we haven't really dealt with before. And so they're trying to raise awareness. That's the only takeaway that I have from the media. Sensationalization of it, that's a different topic. And that's not one that I really am too happy about. But just be careful. If you're going and traveling internationally, I know there's the whole meme of millennials are saying, you know, hey, I'm traveling. It's because these flights are cheap, and then the zoomers, um, they're really picking up on this wherever they can. Still be careful. I know where I currently am, there was a period where you couldn't find hand sanitizers on the island where I'm at. That was just earlier last week. But I mean, things come back in supply. Need to make sure that people aren't price gouging, and stock up when you can, but not to the point where it becomes hard for your fellow person to also get stuff, because then you're creating more of a demand over supply, which means that they're going to start raising the prices, which does not lead to good things. But that's it for this episode of Esports Wrap. Don't forget, we're going to be back next week Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you missed any part of this, we're going to have this up on YouTube, but we're also going to have it up as a podcast episode. Feel free to listen to anywhere that you typically listen to podcasts, exception the SoundCloud. And we'll see you next time.